Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Welcome back. It's just gone 10 o'clock and we cross over to KZN. We're going to be talking with Mohamed Kharwa. He is from SAMNET. And we are looking at the issue regarding the South African Muslim Network, SAMNET. They are pleased but also disappointed to note that a rather misleading video posted by the spokesperson of the South African Jewish Board of Deputies was removed on Thursday, the 14th of August. Okay, Mohammed, assalamu alaikum to you. Welcome to the program. We're going to start off by handing over to you, where you're going to give us context to this matter, and then we'll carry on. Welcome.
Assalamu alaikum and jazakallah for having us on air. I think it's important for us to understand and firstly to start off to say the reason that we are raising this and why we want to be able to put this out there is because it demonstrates that activism works. When you actually engage, when you challenge, things, especially currently in the media and with organizations, it has an impact. And especially in the context of the ongoing genocide and the starvation that is happening in Gaza, it's critical that we do things. Yes, we make dua, we take action, we do BDS, we do all of these things as individuals, but we need to be able to step up and go a step further. And this is a way that we can explain how this works and what can be done. So context to this is on the 19th of July, the South African Muslim Network and our chairperson, Faisal Suleiman, wrote a private letter to the CEO of the Rising Sun newspaper group. Now, Rising Sun is a group which publishes, weekly local knock and drop newspapers in communities across South Africa, but specifically, in KZN. We identified a pattern of behavior that stood out from what was the norm, in other contexts. So the norm very often in these instances is that Rising Sun will only post articles relating to the area that their publication is covering. So if it is in Overport in Durban, they will cover things that are happening there. It can be charitable events, it can be social events, it can be community events, it will be even any of the religious events that are happening. They will put those things in that particular paper. They wouldn't cover things from outside of that area. They might go things within the greater area around it of Durban if it is something that's related, but they very rarely will cover anything outside of that community, and definitely not anything outside the province. And what was identified was that the Rising Sun was publishing articles repeatedly about an organization called Afrika Tikkun. And Afrika Tikkun, they were publishing articles about the charitable work that they do that was not even just outside of the catchment area of the audiences, but some even were outside of the province. And that caught our attention, that caught attention of people in the public. And when we investigated, we realized that Afrika Tikkun is actually a charitable organization that is linked very, very closely with the South African Jewish Board of Deputies, with the South African Zionist Federation, the Friends of Israel, and then the South African Jewish National Fund. And this doesn't appear overtly on their website, it doesn't appear on their Instagram page, but what we can see is from the history, from the people who are on their board, and from the fact that those organizations refer to Afrika Tikkun regularly, including posting messages about Afrika Tikkun's engagements with the diplomatic part of Israel, whether it is the ambassador, people from different parts of the world, or from Israeli government, etc. Those things are there, and there is evidence of that. So when this happened, we wrote to the CEO and we asked why this change or why this exception from what is the normal practice of Rising Sun. This was a private letter. It was meant to engage, and in there we specified that this was about engagement and it was about us being able to ask questions. But we also were very, very clear that this was about holding the press accountable. You cannot have a press who are whitewashing, the topic, who are now using or what they call charity washing, like they talk about greenwashing or sports washing, where they put out a very positive impression of an organization or a community to try and, cover up their enabling of something that is negative. And that's the starting point of the discussion. We highlighted in there that advertisers within the community were noticing, that readership were noticing, and that among these included Muslim advertisers and readers, and that this could have consequences for them if these people then decided, well, this is not actually fair reporting, and that there was a specific intention here to try and portray, Africa Tikkun and the associated organizations, in a good light, and to try and win influence for what is the agenda that we are seeing through those organizations. So that's the broad context of what happened. Then on last week or so, we were then contacted by the South African Jewish Report, and the South African Jewish Report informed us that there was this post on Facebook from the spokesperson of the South African Jewish Board of Deputies, and we went in, we watched that, and they wanted comment because they were going to write an article about it. And what we did was we then looked at the video, and it made really baseless claims. It spoke about a range of different things, like we were threatening the media, we were challenging freedom of speech, we were threatening to withdraw funding. None of those things were there, and then it made the usual kind of associations, mentioning that Nelson Mandela was one of the founding patrons. And but if you look at the board of Africa Tikkun, it has people who have sat on the South African Jewish Foundation. It was founded by the past chief rabbi of the South African Jewish Board of Deputies. And those things are not mentioned in there. So when we look at this, we then responded to the South African Jewish Report, and what we found was that when we then did take this up, the South African Jewish Board of Deputies last week removed their post.
Were they breaking the South African Jewish Board of Deputies? Were they breaking the law by their actions?
It's a very interesting question. We identified that there were a few things that they did which were, which could lead to legal scrutiny, and we are looking into that. The first one was, this was a private letter, and we have to ask the question: how does a letter from SAMNET through to the CEO of a company find its way through to the South African Jewish Board of Deputies? Is this the CEO who has then taken this and passed it on to some other party? Is it somebody who's then taken this and gone to, has he passed it up to Caxton Press, which is their holding company, and have they passed it on? There's lots of different elements that we need to actually address in here as to what happened. And what we were very concerned about, and we did actually write to the Jewish Board of Deputies about, was they didn't redact the letter. So they included private information for the editor and the chairperson, Dr. Suleiman, in the post when they attached it in the comment section, which would almost certainly be an infringement of POPI. Firstly, they're taking personal information and putting it out there, and at the very least, they should have redacted that. And what we as SAMNET did was they made arguments about free speech, etc. So we redacted the information. We gave them the option. We said, we're not going to infringe the right of free speech in South Africa. So if you want to post it, here's a redacted version that you can post. Despite the fact that we are still going to look into any of the other elements in terms of where and how they received that and what they were posting. So from that perspective, again, it comes down to demonstrating that if we go in and we work together, we get the correct advice, we go out and we strategize, and we approach this in different strategies. I think one of the things that we regularly see is that we are very often using the very same techniques or using one technique to try and address every issue. This demonstrates, and this is part of the conversation today, is that this is meant to demonstrate that you don't need to use the same strategy in every instance. When we address this with the Rising Sun, we chose to go, like we very often do, have a direct engagement. It doesn't always have to be, the frontline protest and the hard engagement, because we want to be able to engage with the organization, get their feedback, and then decide whether or not there was something that needs further action. And we also highlighted in our letter, and this is again something that the Jewish Board of Deputies chose to ignore. And this is where we gave feedback to the South African Jewish Report. We highlighted in our letter that the Rising Sun is an independent body. We can't go in there and force anyone who's got their own business and their own model to be able to choose what they want to do. But they are part of the media, and this is a critical point in South Africa. What we have noticed, and recently, I think it was Dr. Ziad Mutala, who's at a law professor based out of the US. He's been talking about the fact that the Sunday Times published articles. They didn't identify and they didn't acknowledge that the people who were writing the articles were on a trip that was paid for by possibly, I think, the South African Jewish Board of Deputies. They were taken to Israel. They were given a tour. They were, kind of given a one-sided perspective. And since coming back, they then write articles which are very pro-Israel, and they've been challenged. And eventually, again, after multiple efforts to try and hold them accountable, they published a very, very small and kind of obscure part acknowledgement of their complicity after it was taken to the press ombudsman, I believe. And that is still being something that I believe people are pursuing as well. So we need to be able to do this and take different strategies. It wasn't that Prof took this issue up at the outset and said, in the public space only. He went in, he followed the process, he took this up with the publication. He then went through to the correct authorities, which was the ombuds, and then he obviously took it to the public when he didn't get a satisfactory result. Now, further to this, we also looked at the South African Jewish Report, and when they contacted us for questions, they asked specific questions, that they wanted answers to. And again, it was very, very directed at, almost implying that we were attacking charitable organizations and the work that they do. And at no point in time in our letter to the Rising Sun did we actually attack or challenge any charitable work of Africa Tikkun. That's their choice. And anybody who does work that is good for individuals and the public, we're not questioning that in any way. Our issue was with why the policy and why the practice of talking to issues only to the community was changed, or an exception was made for this organization versus any other organization. And why is it that they were publishing articles that were completely unrelated to the topic or to the catchment area that they serve?
Okay, let's wrap up then. And I understand the post was then removed. And what do you believe we as a community should be learning from this and moving forward? I know you spoke about changing our strategy, one strategy, or, it's not one size fits all.
Yes.
So there's a lot of learning that has come out of this.
I think what we want the public to understand is that, we need to hold the media accountable. We need to hold organizations accountable and individuals who are supporting and enabling an injustice, a genocide. We need to hold them accountable, and we need to do that directly, firmly, clearly, and using all of the tools available. So, that I think is the critical message. The second message is everyone can make a difference. And it doesn't take an organization to do this. We've had individuals who have tackled this, using, the professor from who's now currently based in the US. We've got people individually tackling this within, where they take up an issue with a media house or with the press person, people who are writing to the media. All of these things count. They are impactful. We must not underestimate the value and the impact of public opinion. We must not underestimate the importance of communicating clearly, crisply, respectfully, but also firmly and strongly about these issues. We must not underestimate the impact of using legal means that are available to hold people accountable. We're seeing, different people trying in different ways. We know that the process and the wheels of justice unfortunately can move very, very slowly. But as we're seeing recently with, South Africans who are serving in the IDF and, measures being taken to hold them accountable, what is happening elsewhere in the world. There have been arrests of people who have been in the IDF in Belgium. There have been, a lot of these instances happening across the world. And these things do not happen in isolation just because someone in a position of authority or an organization does it. We need people to do this. It does take funding, it does take time, it does take skills, but these are skills which people learn. We've been asked previously, how do we know what to do and how to do this? It comes from years of experience, but I think our overall goal is, how do we actually give this skill and transfer it to people, motivate them to act? How do we actually take the mistakes that we may have made 5 or 10 years ago, learn from them, and being able to bring in a real outcome? In this particular example, we've done this to other media. We've taken the SABC to account. We've done this to other news media, and there are constantly people doing this. And any individual out there with a cell phone number, with an email, and with a cell phone can actually do this. Where they write one email, we want people to write to FIFA. We want people to write to the medical organizations, through to the journalist organizations. There are hundreds of journalists who have been killed, and who have been injured and attacked, in Palestine, and specifically in the instance of Gaza. That this has happened in the same week as 5 journalists were assassinated, and this isn't some random act. This was an intentional assassination, because that is specifically what the IDF has said. They have targeted the journalist, and 5 journalists are killed. If that happens, why is it that the journalists in South Africa are sitting silently? Why is it that our media organizations, some of them, are sitting so quietly and not addressing this? We have medical people who are not addressing it as well.
Right. I'm so sorry, but we have to wrap it up there. We've got something else going to play out now. Mohamed Kharwa, South African Muslim Network, and that truly is SAMNET being active in action. Shukran very much. And until the next time, assalamu alaikum to you.
Wa alaikum salam, and jazakallah for the opportunity.
It is 19 after 10 o'clock, and thank you indeed for being with us on the show. We have overrun, but lots of important issues that were covered on the show this morning. From me till next week, Monday, the same time as always. Assalamu alaikum and Khudafiz.